go ahead and start this meeting. I call this meeting to order at 3:03 p.m. At this moment, I'm going to give the floor to President Finley so that he can lead us in a moment of silence for the loss of HSU student and recent graduate, Eunice Estrada. You have the floor, President Finley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm trying to, when Casey went full screen, it blocked out of my, I couldn't access what I need to access. Another HSU student or previous student was lost. Eunice Estrada, she was a kinesiology major who had graduated in May. She died on June 28th and was 23 years old. And so I think, again, as the student body and the student government, we should really take this moment of silence and just remember how important it is to stay connected with one another, especially in these times of distance. And I'll follow up during general discussion on some possible ways that we could be more connected in these COVID times. And so if you can with me now, all mute your screens and your voices and do the moment of silence starting now. Thank you all so much for taking that moment of silence. And I will yield the rest of the time to Madam Chair.
Thank you, President Finley, for leading us in that moment of silence. We will now be taking roll call. When your name is called, please say present. Board Coordinator Park, may you please take the roll call for us today?
Yes, thank you. President Jeremiah Finley.
Present.
Legislative Vice President and Chair Mayuli Cuellar.
Present.
Administrative Vice President David Lopez.
Present.
Student Affairs Vice President Jordan Lamar. Social Justice and Equity Officer Roman Sotomayor.
Present.
Environmental Sustainability Officer Josefina Barantes.
Here.
College of Natural Resources and Sciences Representative Max Schmidbauer. College of Natural Resources and Sciences Representative Kenny Mort.
Present.
College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences Representative Angelica Alvarez.
Present.
College of Professional Studies Representative Jesus Flores.
Present.
At-large Representative and Vice Chair Montel Floyd.
Present.
External Affairs Representative Gio Guerrero.
Present.
Our State Advisor Dean Turnbow.
Present.
And Executive Director Janessa Lund.
Here.
You have quorum with just one voting member absent.
Thank you, Board Coordinator Park, for taking roll call today. As always, I encourage that both our board members and audience members here today take a moment to add their personal pronouns next to their name here on Zoom for today's meeting. This can be done by clicking the three dots that appear when you hover over your image. A rename option should appear when you do that. I would also like to acknowledge that we continue to find ourselves in a virtual space for today's meeting, and I ask that board members and members of the public use their hand raise feature here on Zoom, which can be found in the participants list. When desiring to speak, this notifies me as Chair that you would like to speak and allows me to call upon you with minimal confusion. Also, please remember to mute yourself until you are recognized by the Chair. Thank you, and with that, we will be moving on to the adoption of the agenda for today's meeting. This is an action item, and so a vote will be taking place. I would now like to ask if there is a motion on the floor. The Chair recognizes Representative Floyd. You have the floor.
I motion to adopt the agenda.
Thank you, Representative Floyd. That motion is in order. Representative Floyd has moved to adopt the agenda as is. Is there a second? The Chair recognizes Vice President Lopez.
I second the motion to adopt the agenda as is.
Thank you, Vice President Lopez. It has been moved by Representative Floyd to adopt the agenda as is, and Vice President Lopez has seconded that motion. We will now move on to a vote. Are there any objections or abstentions to the motion to adopt the agenda? Seeing none, the ayes have it and the motion carries. The agenda is adopted. We will now move on to the adoption of 2 meeting minutes for previous meetings dated June 26, 2020 for our 3rd board meeting and July 13th, 2020 for our special meeting that we just had. This is an action item. I would now like to ask if there is a motion on the floor. The Chair recognizes Representative Mort.
Motion to adopt the meeting minutes.
Thank you. That motion is in order. Representative Mort has moved to adopt the meeting minutes dated June 26, 2020 and July 13th, 2020. Is there a second? The Chair recognizes Representative Alvarez.
I second.
Thank you. It has been moved by Representative Mort to adopt the meeting minutes dated June 26, 2020 and July 13th, 2020, and Representative Alvarez has seconded that motion. We will now move on to a vote. Are there any objections or abstentions to the motion? I'm going to inquire of Representative Alvarez if you forgot to put down your hand or if that's an abstention.
I'm sorry, what?
Oh, you still have your hand raised, so I was wondering if it was an abstention.
Oh, my bad. I didn't know how to remove it. Okay, sorry.
You're good. I'll go ahead and ask again if there are any objections or abstentions to the motion. Seeing none, the ayes have it and the motion carries. Both meeting minutes are adopted. We will now move on to the Chair's report. First, I'd like to say hello to everyone, and I hope that everyone is feeling healthy and feeling well, especially during these times. I welcome you all here today, and I hope that we're all doing well. I thank you all for joining us today for our 4th meeting of the year, or well, of summer. For today's meeting, we have a time-certain item for new business at 3:45 p.m. So please keep this in mind, just in case we are in the middle of public comment, reports, or a business item. I will have to jump forward to that item of business, and we will return where we left off once that item of business is complete. We have a longer agenda today as well, and we have 1 item of old business and 5 items for new business for today's meeting. I'd like to remind the board that as chair, I may limit responses today for the sake of time and in the best interest of getting us through our agenda. I will take new speakers before letting folks go twice, and I hope that everyone keeps this in mind, especially in moments like general discussion, and debate. Thank you, and with that, I conclude my chair's report. We will now move on to public comment. As per the Gloria Romero Open Meeting Act of 2000, authorized by Section 89306, every AS Board of Directors agenda for regular meetings shall provide an opportunity for members of the public to directly address the AS Board of Directors on any item affecting higher education at the campus or statewide level, provided that no action shall be taken on any item not appearing on the agenda. However, the Board of Directors may briefly respond to statements made or questions posed by a person exercising their public testimony rights, may ask a question for clarification, make a brief announcement, or make a brief report on their own activities. The AS Board of Directors may also provide a reference to resources for factual information, request staff to report back to the body at a subsequent meeting concerning any matter, or request that a matter of business be placed on a future agenda. Persons recognized by the chair should first identify themselves by name. Time limits will be established by the chair depending on the number of people wishing to speak and the length of the agenda. The maximum amount of time per speaker shall not exceed 10 minutes, and if it is exceeded, I will go ahead and ask that the public comment be wrapped up. In times other than public comment, members of the public will need to have time yielded to them by a board member, such as general discussion. The floor is now open for public comment. I will now begin a speakers list. If you wish to speak, please raise your hand using the button found in the participants list to be recognized. Is there any public comment at this time? Seeing no public comment, we will go ahead and continue with the agenda. We'll now be moving on to the appointment section of this meeting. When recognized, please state whether or not you have any appointments to recommend for today's meeting. President Finley, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I have no appointments for now. I know some folks are in the audience have applied, so I just want to use this time, if I can, to really say that you will be contacted once a decision has been made behind the application that you have applied for, and it's looking towards being August 7th. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, President Finley. Vice President Lopez, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have no appointments at this time.
Thank you, Vice President Lopez. I myself do not have any appointees to recommend for today's meeting, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe Vice President Lamar is with us today. So with that, we'll go ahead and conclude the appointment section of the meeting. We will now move on to the board reports. Board members were presented with the option to familiarize themselves with written reports through the summer report template that was emailed to us by our board coordinator, Park. If you filled out a written report, you may state so when called upon, and please remember that written reports are not yet required, but I will mention that filling out summer reports might be a great way to practice before the academic year begins. If you did not fill out a written report, no pressure, you may state your report when called upon, as we have done in previous meetings. We will go ahead and begin the board reports with our president. The chair recognizes President Finley. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll keep this brief. I have two main things I want to talk about. One being the timeline for requests for proposals for dining services, which the campus has really put out a call for. I sent this out to the board to some board members, and so basically what this is, this request for proposals, what it will do is put out a bid for what dining services will look like, or who will do and provide dining services for HSU, and we'll talk about it more in the discussion later on today. However, the campus is looking to put together a task force of sorts to really head this this bidding services and this request for proposals. And so with that being said, we need to provide with the campus with an AS co-chair. So this could be a student member of the board of directors or a student of the association. If folks aren't interested in doing it, that's okay too. I can take this on. And the second thing I want to talk about is I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. Nothing more to report, Madam Chair. I think that's really all I had to cover for this meeting.
Thank you, President Finley. The chair recognizes the Administrative Vice President Lopez. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have two main things that I'd like to report. The first being, I have begun working on the club grant application that will be finalized and be distributed by on a training for August 22nd. I have been working on that with Executive Director Lund. So that'll provide several services for student organizations in the throughout the year. The next big thing that I've been working on has been still trying to truly address any student needs or concerns when it comes to the budgeting process and the finances of AS, and working on that transparency, which will I'll go into great detail about later on in this meeting. But I yield the rest of my time, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Vice President Lopez. For my board report today as Legislative Vice President, I'd like to thank everyone who assisted me with feedback and help during my writing process for the resolution I co-authored with President Finley that was adopted at Monday's special meeting. And I'd like to state that although the policy impacting our international students has since been rescinded, our student advocacy does not need to stop there. and I commend our external affairs representative for the work and dedication he put into getting this resolution onto the board table at last Monday's special meeting. The 2 resolutions that were adopted had been my predominant work for quite some time, and I am looking forward to seeing what I can allocate my time and dedication to next. So please feel free to reach out to me if you have any projects or resolutions that you would like support on. I have more time now, and I hope to have a more substantial report for our next meeting, and I hope to share with you all what I will be working on then. With that, I conclude my board report, and the chair recognizes the Social Justice and Equity Officer, Sotomayor. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For my report, I have just a quick updates on what I've been doing since the last meeting. I've joined President Finley and External Affairs Officer Guerrero in writing the resolution titled "A Call for the Restructuring of the University Police Department." I've supported External Affairs Officer Guerrero in releasing a statement to international students in response to the now walked back ICE regulations. I began the process of developing new methods for associate students to share more resources with students and increase our professional development. I've continued to work to imagine Humboldt State Grad Pledge, reimagine the Humboldt State Grad Pledge and process behind that and the website as well. And I've met with administration on how Humboldt State can better instruct their faculty on leading classrooms that are safe for transgender students. If any of these projects interest you, I encourage anyone to reach out to me on how you can get involved as well. And that would be greatly appreciated, actually. So thank you. I yield my time.
Thank you, Officer Sotomayor. The chair recognizes the Environmental Sustainability Officer, Barantes. You have the floor.
Hello, everyone. So far, I've had a committee meeting with the Grad Pledge Alliance, and in that, we discussed how to reach out to alumni so that we could advertise their profiles on our website for the Grad Pledge Alliance, and we had a subcommittee meeting to talk about what questions to ask these alumni and how to better engage with them so we could show people incoming to HSU kind of what people do in terms of not only sustainability when they leave HSU, but also in terms of social justice.
Thank you, Officer Barantes. The chair recognizes the External Affairs Representative, Guerrero. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Busy month, crazy month, actually. So my work has been more centered around the UPD resolution and with CSSA and addressing the international crisis our students are facing. I'm going to echo what my Luli said. The resolution that we passed on Monday, because the guidelines were rescinded, does not mean that it was passed in vain. It still is a strong symbolic show of support for our international community at HSU. And we're going to continue to adopt a similar resolution on the CSSA level that I'll be presenting tomorrow at CSSA. Just to show our support for our international students and remind our state government that we stand with them, and we hope that they'll continue to fight for them. I know that the Trump administration is looking to prevent our future 2020 fall students, international students, from coming into the United States, which is again unacceptable. So we'll keep everyone updated on how that's going. So right now, what's in talks with CSSA is AB 1460, and so what that is it's a graduation requirement that integrates ethnic studies within the requirements of all the CSU campuses. Now, everyone is in agreement in terms of we should have some sort of requirement for ethnic studies. Now, in terms of supporting the bill itself, from what I'll say is that pretty much everyone is kind of in the middle, because the governor released a proposal that was a little different than AB 1460, and that proposal, and the reason why I figure the reason why I think that proposal is intriguing is because it opens up more options in terms of what counts as ethnic studies. So within AB 1460, I think it would be just constrained to four sort of areas. And yeah, the governor's proposal introduces more different ethnicities and different sorts of identities in terms of things that would qualify for ethnic studies. But it's still in the talks, and CSSA doesn't know what it supports yet. Last year it supported AB 1460, but governor's proposal came out, and so it's in the talks. So UPD resolution. I've been working deliberately with our social justice and equity officer, Roman, and our president, Jeremiah Finley, and drafting up a resolution that we will have our first reading on today. And we met with Vice President Dowes and Vice President Meriwether and other members, including our Ebony, our Dean of Students. And we had some really great discussions, and I think that we're all in agreement and that this resolution is going to be effective, and that we're going to really do some amazing stuff in terms of restructuring our university police department. And then aside from that, that pretty much concludes my report. A lot of it's been centered on CSSA. I honestly think that our relationship with CSSA is drastically improving, and HSU is having a big voice or a more prominent voice in CSSA, and hoping that relationship continues to evolve, and that future students who assume this position will be in the same place. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to how our relationship with CSSA continues to evolve. And right now we're on solid ground. I'll tell you guys that. But thank you.
Thank you, Representative Guerrero. The chair recognizes the representative for the College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences, Alvarez. You have the floor.
Hi, everyone. It's Angelica. I'm just trying to better understand my role as a representative of College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences. So I expect to, before the next board meeting, to have met with the board more often, or just one-on-one, so that I can better understand my role. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Alvarez. The chair recognizes the representative for the College of Natural Resources and Sciences, Mort. You have the floor.
Hey, everybody. So since my last meeting, the other CNRS representative, Max Schmidtbauer, and I had a meeting with the Dean of CNRS, and we brought up some issues that we kind of want to work together on and try to accomplish some good things. So one of the main things we talked about was Max brought up the issue that it's difficult for CNRS students to kind of get research opportunities with professors in CNRS. So we talked about kind of creating a research tab like on the CNRS website so that research opportunities are more accessible for students. And we also talked about engaging more AS and the administration engaging more with students. So we talked about ways that we can do that. And Max said that he would volunteer to set up kind of a CNRS Instagram campaign so that we can get more student voices involved. And yeah, that's what I have to report. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Mort. The chair recognizes the representative for the College of Professional Studies, Flores. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to piggyback on what Representative Alvarez said, and just trying to get to know you guys more and just get to understand my role better throughout these weeks and months. That's pretty much it.
Thank you, Representative Flores. The chair recognizes the at-large Representative Floyd. You have the floor.
Hello, everyone. Hope everyone's doing fine. Been working on the PSA for combative blackness, been meeting with Casey and Jeremiah just to get more information and help with that. So I reached out to Marcom yesterday, so hopefully I have a response with them to move forward with our partnership, hopefully with them, so we can have the video be combined and edited appropriately. So those are the things I've been working on.
Thank you, Representative Floyd. The chair recognizes Executive Director Lund. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair Cuellar. In addition to the items that I have listed in the project tracker, an item I've been working on lately is the e-bike contract. So HIFE is the Humboldt Energy Independence Fund. It's one of your Category 2 fees, and they that committee has purchased an electric bike that they would like to gift to AS. And so right now I'm pouring through all the logistics of that and what that would mean to AS and what sort of responsibility and things like that. The intent of the e-bike is to transport compost around campus. So anyway, if anybody's interested, please reach out about that. To echo President Finley, I do want to strongly encourage, if any of you are interested in dining, it's going to be the dining RFP, which is the request for proposals. And so you could have a hand in student voice in what you would like future contracts to look like. So if you have any interest in that, please reach out to President Finley. The other task force is the Student Union Task Force, and this is going to be very important for, it's going to be a large student group with a few advisors sprinkled in there to really discuss what you want your robust student union to look like. You all have the senior administration behind you, and they are in full support of a robust student union, and they're going to listen closely to this task, the Student Union Task Force. So if talking about how the UC and Nelson Hall are configured and how they can best serve students, then that's another task force I strongly encourage you to get involved with. And just as a heads up, I'm working on our conflict of interest. Every year the board signs acknowledgement of a conflict of interest, and so just as a heads up, that will come out, and all that's expected is that you read through it, and then there'll be a place for everybody to sign and date. So that'll be probably before our next meeting. And again, if all of you should have my direct cell number. If you don't, feel free to go through GroupMe until you can get my cell number. But if anything comes up, please text. And if you want to meet at any point, please feel free to directly schedule in the calendar, or just shoot me a text and say, hey, can we set something up? If the calendar doesn't work for me, I will absolutely reach back out to you, and we'll figure out a better time. And I think that's all for now. That completes my report. Thank you, the chair.
Thank you, Executive Director Lund. The chair recognizes the Dean of Students, Dr. Turnbow. You have the floor.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I too will keep it succinct and short. A few items we're going to talk about later on the agenda, so I will skip over those for now. The first thing I'll mention is that you all should have seen, it was announced I think either late last week or Monday this week, but the official restructure of our Office of Student Life and realignment of our Social Justice, Equity, and Inclusion Center. And so that has been a project that a lot of our staff has worked really hard on, and somewhat in partnership with AS as we've transitioned some of the AS programs that will report directly and be supported by that office. So that's been an exciting change. In connection with that, I have spent the last several weeks meeting with some administrators separately to see how my office particularly can support students and some student employment funds. And so some of those groups who are now clubs who used to be AS programs, I'm excited to announce that come back in August when our center staff returns. And we look to bring students back, that we will be looking to set up a way for students to have some employment dollars within those programs. So I'm excited about that as well. Lastly, I'll mention is that in regards to communication, I think sometimes it seems to be just a miscommunication gap on where information is shared. And so typically, well, one, I meet with your president biweekly and share info, and then I presume that it's shared there, and then I do updates here, of course. But if there's ever questions or insight that any of you students are looking for, please just feel free to email me. Typically, it's just that a lot of the other board members just aren't aware of conversations that have already been had with some of your other leadership, just because we don't email every single member. So I think it's important that we remember that it's not students being left out of any conversations. In fact, I am typically pulling students in, asking for questions and opinions. That Student Union Task Force actually will be working directly with my office about rebranding and reshaping what Nelson Hall East and UC could look like. So the more students involved, the better. So please just don't hesitate to reach out. And with that, I yield to the next item on the agenda. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Dr. Turnbow. With that, we conclude our report section for today's meeting. We will now move on to general discussion. Anyone may follow up with questions regarding reports. I now ask that you use the raise hand feature on Zoom to notify me that you wish to speak. With that, we will begin with President Finley. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to follow up on what Executive Director Ludd had mentioned about the Student Union Task Force, as well as what Dr. Turnbull had mentioned. So for this task force, I've been working with staff to basically create this application process for it. And thank you, Casey, for really getting that out to us. And so what's going to happen is over these next couple of days is I'll be putting together some type of charge and a general kind of description of what this is. And so if folks are interested in working with that, really reach out to me, and we can work together to create the charge, to create everything like that, in collaboration with the Dean of Students Office, so that we can get it out to students and get students involved on this process.
Thank you, President Finley. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? You can go ahead and raise your hand now. Seeing no speakers, we will move on with our agenda. Old business is now in order. Our only item of old business is the second reading of the resolution titled Resolution to Support the Former Hilltop Marketplace to be designated as a food sovereignty lab and cultural workspace. The board will receive a presentation and consider a resolution that the AS president issues a 1 to 3 paragraph memo in support of the food sovereignty lab project in the former Hilltop Marketplace location to be signed by the board of directors. This resolution was authored by a student of the association, Amanda McDonald, with sponsorship from the executive committee. Officer Sotomayor, you now have the floor to present and give the second reading of the resolution.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to give the second reading of this resolution, and I encourage everyone to vote in favor of it. This is a wonderful program, and it's led by wonderful people, and so I think it will be a great addition to our campus. So I'm going to go ahead and start. Again, this resolution was authored by Amanda R. McDonald, the NNAS Research Assistant, and was brought to the AS Executive Committee for sponsorship. It is titled A Resolution to Support the Former Hilltop Marketplace be designated as a food sovereignty lab and cultural workspace. Whereas the Associated Students AS Board of Directors of Humboldt State University, HSU, is the single recognized voice for over 6,500 students, and whereas the mission of the Associated Students of Humboldt State University serves to, quote, assist in the protection of rights and interests of the individual student and student body, and, quote, to stimulate the educational, social, and physical and cultural well-being of the university community. And whereas in 2018, a research project investigating national public opinion about how non-natives perceive Native peoples revealed that, quote, most people believe that the Native population is declining, and most do not think much about Native people, if at all. Native people are misrepresented if they are even mentioned and are invisible in American society. Invisibility is in essence the modern form of racism used against Native Americans. It is this invisibility that leads to a college access and completion crisis among Native American students. When a student is invisible, his or her academic and social needs are not met. This leads to students feeling alienated and alone, derailing their matriculation and the realization of their dreams and potential. Invisibility prevents many young Native people from even thinking college is a possibility. Others entertain the idea but are stopped from enrolling in college because of negative experiences with admissions processes or on college campuses. Removal is one method in which Native Americans are rendered invisible on campuses, end quote. Whereas current Indigenous representation on Humboldt State University's campus is lacking substance, there are areas where Humboldt State has already succeeded, including the Native American Forum and recent lobby remodel project within the Behavioral and Social Science building. Whereas The Office of the President at Humboldt State University lists the following commitments on their website. Quote, "We will commit to increasing our diversity of people and perspectives. We will be exemplary partners with our communities, including tribal nations." And quote, "We believe we have a special opportunity to learn from the Native American cultures, the unique ecosystem, and special communities of our region, and to apply that knowledge," end quote. Whereas in fall 2019, the students of NAS 331, Indigenous Natural Resource Management Practices, imagined a class project that would have lasting benefits for the campus community beyond the scope of one semester. Students worked collaboratively to conduct interviews, research, and identify potential funding. Students interviewed Indigenous faculty and staff and asked how they would re-indigenize Humboldt State University campus. Interviewees expressed the need for workshops and space for making traditional foods, regalia, baskets, and medicines. The proposed project from the class is a food sovereignty lab and cultural workshop center. In November 2019, we submitted a case request to the space request to the University Space and Facilities Advisory Committee to implement the lab/center in the former Hilltop Marketplace in the BSS building. Beginning spring 2020, 2 student research assistants were hired through the Sponsored Programs Foundation to pursue further work on this project. We have partnered with the Native American Studies Program, Indian Tribal and Educational Personnel Program, the Council of American Indian Faculty and Staff, the Environmental Studies Program, and students from across majors and disciplines at Humboldt State University to complete the beginning phase of this research project. The students in our class who helped to design the first phase of this project represented 12 different majors from both the College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences and the College of Natural Resources and Sciences. Whereas the concept of food sovereignty directly relates to building community resilience and preparing for disasters such as global pandemics and climate change. The Declaration of Millennium, the first global forum on food sovereignty, defines food sovereignty is the right of peoples to healthy and culturally appropriate food produced through ecologically sound and sustainable methods, and their right to define their own food and agricultural systems. It puts the aspirations and needs of those who produce, distribute, and consume food at the heart of food systems and policies rather than the demands of markets and corporations, end quote. Whereas the Food Sovereignty Lab will function as a workshop and research center for practicing food sovereignty in multiple innovative ways, centering food sovereignty through indigenous pedagogies and enhancing academic resources for multiple disciplines across campus. This lab will illuminate respect for learning with Native American cultures and helping build the future of how we address climate change, food insecurity, and social justice. Whereas the lab will include a commercially certified kitchen, storage cabinets, large work tables, office space for research and studying, a whiteboard, a large television for use in presentations, and a sound system. In addition, a native plant and food garden to be installed around the BSS building to supplement the Food Sovereignty Lab. Whereas the Food Sovereignty Lab is seeking to create a more sustainable, socially just, and welcoming campus by promoting education and research with food sovereignty. Food sovereignty teaches us that the relationships between people and nature are fundamental to our existence. A Food Sovereignty Lab can provide a platform to educate people on how to repair that relationship and build decolonized futures. Whereas the vision of Associated Students strives for social and environmental justice and enhancing the livelihood and academic success of the student body. Whereas the space request for this lab and center was denied April 22nd, 2020 with, quote, "The committee has considered the former Hilltop Marketplace space for a function that will serve as a general student space that may be accessed by all," end quote, parenthesis, such as a student lounge, whereas there is a lounge on every floor of the BSS building, end parenthesis. Whereas the Food Sovereignty Lab, as designed by the students, is envisioned as a space that can be accessed by all, not only by our diverse student population, but also by our surrounding communities, tribal nations, and national and international scholars and community leaders. It truly opens up a space at our university that can build excitement and true connection, which can only serve to increase our impact for recruitment, retention, and enrollment at Humboldt State. There is potential for this project to partner with organizations across the world who are working on these issues. And as we look at how HSU can strategically, quote, "tell our story," end quote, and build opportunities for students, this project would answer many of the ongoing calls to action for shaping the future of our university. Whereas Considering the history of both the BSS building as being originally designed to honor Native peoples and space on campus, the ongoing discussions from the president's office and administration at HSU to, quote, indigenize Humboldt State, end quote. This is precisely why we are hoping for a continuity of indigenous space near the Native Forum, Goudini Gallery, and NAS department. Whereas we appeal this decision and request the support of the associate students to advocate for the Food Sovereignty Lab, that it be implemented in the former Hilltop Marketplace to support student success, professional development, inclusivity, social and environmental justice. Resolved that the Associated Students of Humboldt State University are requesting the inclusion of the Indigenous Food Sovereignty Lab in the upcoming new HSU Academic Master Plan per consultation with the submitting author, Amanda McDonald, and any edits that are necessary. Resolved, the AS president issues a 1-to-3 paragraph memo in support of the Food Sovereignty Lab in the former Hilltop Marketplace that is signed by the board of directors. I believe there should be new, okay, I see what happened. I was reading my draft on my computer and not the screen. So I'll go ahead and reread these last three because I know that they're the ones that were changed. Forgive me for that. I'll start over. Resolved that the Associated Students of Humboldt State University are requesting the inclusion of the Indigenous Food Sovereignty Lab in the upcoming new HSU Academic Master Plan. Resolved, the AS president issues a 1-to-3 paragraph memo in support of the Food Sovereignty Lab project in the former Hilltop Marketplace location that is signed by the board of directors. Resolved, the resolution in AS president's memo is sent but not limited to University President Tom Jackson Jr., Vice President of Enrollment Management Jason L. Meriwether, Vice President of Administration and Finances Douglas V. Dawes, Interim Dean of Students Ebony Turnbow, Interim Executive Director of the Office of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Edelmira Reynoso, Intermediate Associate Vice President of Student Success Stephen St. Ange, Department Chair of Native American Studies Kutcha Resling Baldi, the Humboldt State University Senate, the Lumberjack, and El Leñador. Thank you. And I apologize again for that mix-up.
Thank you, Officer Sotomayor, for presenting. We will right now at this time, we're going to go ahead and jump forward to our time-certain business item. And then once we're done with that, we will go ahead and pick up directly at the discussion of Roman's presentation. So new business is now in order. Our first item of new business is a time-certain discussion item regarding the dining services at HSU. Campus administrators will provide updates regarding conversations about dining services and the University Center, which the board will then discuss. I would like to begin with the campus administrators who have joined us today. I now ask that the campus administrators who are here today please raise their hand in the participants list to be recognized. The chair recognizes Dr. Meriwether. You have the floor.
Hello. I can't see myself. Can you see me? Can you all see me?
We cannot see you.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. Well, hopefully that will solve a bit of this. Dr. Turnbow, who is already in the meeting, will join me in parts of this conversation. I don't know why my video is acting crazy, so I apologize. I will attempt to screen share a couple of things, and so hopefully you'll be able to see those things when the time comes. This is really a package deal. It's dining and the bookstore. So I want to thank the board for allowing me some time and opportunity to share with you all what we're working on. So my 1-year anniversary at Humboldt State was 2 days ago on Wednesday, on July 15th. I harken back to my very first meeting on campus with student government president at that time, Yadira Cruz. Yadira and I met in the dining commons because she wanted me to see a few things in dining. So I share with you my first meeting with my first student government president is in dining. The first thing we talked about was those setups in dining where students have to bring their backpacks and put their backpacks off when they walk in dining, which creates the implication that there's an idea that students are going to steal, and you're going to steal the cereal or steal the milk or something like that, which just really sends a horrible message. go on. There were lots of conversation and concerns around food quality, the price of dining, the complications of the J-point system. I've jokingly said, but there's a lot of truth in the jest, that I have a PhD and I'm still not smart enough to figure out the J-point system, and I welcome anyone who can help me understand it. I say that to say that there are a number of questions around dining, and I want to be clear, this isn't about people. This isn't an indictment or coming at any individual. This is about the long-standing system that I think Humboldt State has taken advantage of, that is not a student-first system in terms of dining. And so with respect to housing, we have data from housing that the number one reason students move off campus or choose not to live on campus is the concern about having a meal plan. We also have data from housing which shows that people live in campus apartments, and to be candid, I really want to raise that building and build something better for students. But the number one reason people want to live in campus apartments, which I think really is the first building that needs to go, is because it doesn't compel students to have a meal plan. And other experiences I've had in dining, experiences I bring with me from where I am, and really also the president, Dr. Jackson, has had all these same things on his doorstep for a year. And so what we've been looking at with dining is how can we create a real student-first experience? My question for you all is, how many of you have visited another campus, visit a friend, a relative, a boo or a bae at another campus, and while you were there, you ate on campus, you had the experience, you saw the options, and you said to yourself, well, why can't Humboldt have this? I see a couple of heads nodding, and if your screen is out, I know some of you are nodding too. Oh, thank you, I got an emoji, that's cool. And so the president has spent, Dr. Jackson has spent the last year really putting a lot of pressure to put some changes in dining. There was a recommendation from dining this year to raise the rates, which Dr. Jackson said absolutely not, we will not raise the rates. We've asked for a number of things from dining that the president has wanted to enhance the student experience, and it really based on our own experiences, but most of all based on things that the students have shared with us since we've been here. And concurrently with that is the bookstore. So this is really a two-part thing. The bookstore is in what I believe is the absolute worst place on any campus in the United States for a college bookstore. There's no frontage parking. You have to park and walk nearly half a mile and then go up 3 flights of steps or an elevator to get to the bookstore. And so with that in mind, that's a bit problematic. The spacing of the bookstore is an absolute prime real estate that really should be student space. I have letters from both student government president Elizabeth Cano Sanchez, past president, and current student government president Jeremiah Finley, who have shared that they, even through the peaceful exchange of power as presidents of the student government, are united in the need to have better space and for the students in the University Center and to move the bookstore. So we've been exploring that under the direction of the president, who's delegated that responsibility to me to figure it out. If you go through the University Center, student government has what I believe, and I hate to say this on the tape recording, but it's true, it has the rattiest space in the entire University Center. And frankly, Associated Students deserves better space. If you go in Center Arts, I love Center Arts, they're great people over there, but the Center Art offices are amazing. The administrative offices for the University Center are amazing and have a nice kitchen and all this space. And then our student government is in a small, cramped, and the absolute worst space in the building. That needs to be fixed. Next is Nelson Hall. President Jackson, from a student first experience, we have heard from student government, from President Cruz to President Cano Sanchez to now President Finley, that Nelson Hall is a space that should be student space. There's extreme dissatisfaction with the fact that Nelson Hall West was renovated and is hosting the fundraising office and the alumni office. There's extreme dissatisfaction that the first floor is taken up by other offices. And so Dr. Jackson and all of that has sent out a memo recently to the vice presidents and to the head of the university center to make a couple of organizational changes. First and foremost, he has directed that the development and fundraising office move out of Nelson Hall West and that space be given to students. He's moved the university center from under the auspices of the CFO into my organization. He has also given a directive that the university center no longer charge students for the exorbitant charges for catering, for services, for setup, and the fees that are charged to associated students every year for programs and activities. He has directed that all of those things be stopped until I establish a review with the dean of students and with associated students to understand those fees and how all of those things have worked. So with all of that, this is all designed for a student first experience. What I want to share with you, and then I'll dig a little more deeply into dining. I'm going to try to share my screen. So I'm going to share with you, this is the operating agreement. If you can see my screen, I hope that you can. For the, now all your wonderful faces are over my screen. There we go. Okay, this is the operating agreement between Humboldt State and the University Center. And so if you look through this auxiliary in section 3 in campus oversight, it clearly states that it's the responsibility and authority of the campus president regarding auxiliary organizations, and sets forth with an executive order and a state law, which requires the auxiliary organization operating conforming with CSU and campus policy, so on and so forth. But essentially, the president or their designee, which is now me, and the chief financial officer are responsible for overseeing the auxiliary of the university center. And essentially, when it says in there, as part of periodic reviews, the campus president should examine the need for each auxiliary and look at the efficiency of the auxiliary operation and administration. And then there are a bunch of attachments, which I'll gladly forward to you in an email, but Casey has this document that she can share with you. So essentially, the president and the CFO are responsible for oversight of the university center and the operation, and the president has now delegated that authority to me. And all of this, what I want to accomplish is a student-first experience. I go back to dining now to speak a little more directly on dining, which is why you invited me, but this all ties together. With respect to dining, I go back to when I was in one of your meetings several months ago, and the issue came up of feeding students who work on campus in dining. I go back to a student trip that I was on with a group of students who shared their concerns that in the marketplace, students who were suspected of theft had their photos embarrassingly posted in the marketplace in the lobby area and in the depot. I'll look at a number of those things. I'll look at the fact that even in spite of a projected loss of 300 students on campus and a correlating loss of meal plans, both housing and dining sought to raise their rates, which was subsequently stopped, and at the same time were able to project that money would be going into reserves. That is highly problematic. My aim and what will happen with dining, and we want to have your support on this process, is to go back and to look at all of this and figure out and establish a student-first, student-led process of running the university center and running dining. Again, this is not about people, but this is what Humboldt has done for the last 40 years. It makes no sense to me that we cannot feed students who work, yet we have $1.5 million in the bank. When I came to your meeting, with your permission, I talked to the head of the university center and to the director of dining, who's now retired, and said, hey, the students are really concerned about this. You can expect a lumberjack story. Please fix this. I've overseen dining with Chartwell's, with Airmark, with Sodexo, with Thompson Hospitality, and I've run 2 in-house dining operations. And at no time have we ever failed to feed students who work. That is a simple and basic element of running a dining program that has to be fixed. If a student works 4 hours, they get a 15 to 20-minute break and a free meal. They work 5 or 6 hours, they get a 30-minute break and a free meal. It's student first thinking, not lining dollars in a reserve account. It is student first thinking. And so I have been charged by the president to do that. And I submit to you that I want to work with both the Dean of Students, with President Finley, and with all of this board to completely reimagine dining, the University Center, and all of the operations contained within to create a full and robust student first experience. I have offered up the Jolly Giant Commons, and I've offered up the Great Hall as options to move the bookstore into fronted space so that we can give that entire bookstore space to Associated Students. Associated Students has already received Nelson Hall East first floor space, and we will work with you all and the Dean of Students to realign Nelson Hall West to be a full student access space. All of those things go together. With respect to dining, and I'll gladly take questions in just a moment. With respect to dining, what we're doing is we have reached out to a company called Aladdin to come in here now while we're only serving 1,000 students who live off campus and a smaller number of off-campus students who will utilize space during our virtual and hybrid environment, to come in and to completely restructure the system without raising prices, and to completely put ourselves in a position that we have student first dining. I know a number of you yesterday morning braved the 8 o'clock hour to meet with and question Aladdin about their background and about their history for the first year. The priorities that they shared and the priorities based on the student questions were that the meals would be tailored. I think I heard about 5 times in the meeting that we will not have calzones and fries every Tuesday, that there's a focus on health and wellness, a nutritional focus, a community focus, and that they will make an effort to purchase as many things as possible from local vendors in California and in our county and the surrounding areas. This will also improve and enhance our catering services, eliminate a number of the exorbitant fees for student organizations, leverage technology to enhance the student experience, to have ease of ordering and selection of meals, and to come up with a simple, effective, and easier point system. Food quality is important. And the most important thing, and the first thing I asked for in my first conversation, the first thing that your president, Finley, asked for, the first thing that Dr. Jackson asked for, and the first question, which I think was asked by Vice President Woods in the meeting yesterday, was what about student employment? It is standard with external dining companies that when they come in, current students all keep their jobs. I will accept nothing less. All current students who are working must keep their jobs. I will not accept anything less. This group also says that they will expand hiring as we return to campus and are willing to work with students even in the digital space to make sure that no student loses a job in this transition. And by the way, they will eat on campus when they work. We will not be, along with I think one other CSU, the only school to not do that for our students. But this is beyond just meeting. This is beyond just meals for the students. This is about creating a robust student experience with more options at a more affordable price. And they have already committed that they will not raise any rate beyond the published rate. And then from there, we will spend the next year going through a bid process, a request for proposals and a public bid process. I made clear to student leaders yesterday, Aladdin is aware from both Dr. Jackson and from me that they only have a 1-year contract and they will not be guaranteed a bid. They will have to work through the process just like everyone else. What I'd like to do, and then I'll take questions, is share a little bit more about our bid process. So you should see the draft schedule for the dining RFP. I hope that you can see it. So essentially, I've made outreach to the president of RHA and the president of Associated Students to confirm that they will be able to support us with student participants. I'm asking for 2 student reps from AS on the committee, 2 reps from RHA, and the 5th student rep will be an AS appointed co-chair. And I believe President Finley has already made an overture to members of the AS board, or he will be soon, seeking a student co-chair. From there, the professional staff co-chair will likely be Donyette King from Housing and Residence Life. And a student chair and a professional staff chair will work together with a committee of 10 people, 5 students and 5 professional staff and or faculty, who will go through a process. By July 31st, I hope to have confirmed the student government appointed co-chair. And from August 1st to 5th, we will make a campus announcement to share the full RFP timeline and the names of the AS appointed student chair and the professional staff chair. From there, we will spend the next month in completing the committee appointments. By September 1st, we will have a full committee. October through November, there will be campus visits, virtual or in person, to see facilities and come up with qualifiers and disqualifiers for the RFP process. This is important of a part of the job, is actually going out and tasting food to see if it's okay and if it's what you want on campus. But this is a critical place for students to participate in the process. From there, we anticipate posting the RFP for 60 days from December 1st to February 1st. Then from February 2nd to March 31st, we'll review the RFP, have presentations by vendors, select and announce a vendor by April 15th. And then from there, from April 15th to July 1st to July 15th, the vendors will complete contract work and transition to campus. As I noted, it's really important that we have half the committee be students, and we have representation from associated students, students on campus, and students off campus as a part of that. And to make sure that this bid process allows us to select the best vendor on campus. The other element of this that's important is we will also put in contingencies for this new vendor for student employment, and to make sure that our current professional employees also have every opportunity to stay on. So those are the priorities that we'll set, and the rest of those things will be established through work and through partnership with the students in the search committee. I'll take your questions now, and I'll close with this. There is no reason for students on campus not to have an amazing dining experience. I frequently say the hardest thing that you should have to do as a student is go to class. It is critical and it is important that we provide a first-class campus experience for each of you. And for here, I will hush and take your questions. Thank you for allowing me to spend a little time with you.
Thank you, Dr. Meriwether. I would like to ask if Dr. Trimbo has anything to add. If not, we can go ahead and move towards board members.
Questions are good.
If any board member would like to make a comment, or we'll be entering discussion, so you can make a comment or ask a question, you can go ahead and raise your hand now to be recognized. The chair recognizes Administrative Vice President Lopez. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Dr. Meriwether, for that wonderful presentation. I really appreciate the amount of effort you've put into it. It is paramount just by its quality alone. So my first question I'd like to ask is, you mentioned that the point system will be made to be more effective. And so I am assuming that with that statement, we are eliminating any possibility for a meal swipe option. Are we planning to stick with that J-point option, or are we open to other conversations when it comes to exploring meal swipes, or what are your thoughts on that?
So there are a couple of elements to that. I'm trying to switch devices, and hopefully you can see me now. I'm trying to switch to my phone. So if I change in the middle of this, forgive me. Actually, someone just kicked me out. Casey, can you let me in?
Oh, I didn't kick you out, so
It's okay. It's okay. It's thinking now. So back to your question. Thank you, Vice President Lopez, for your question. What I can share with you is that we are looking at an option that's more consistent. The series of discounts and the series of pricing structures for different elements of this, it's really, again, not just, at least in my estimation. Wait a minute, let me. How about now? Okay, thank you. What we're aiming to do is to create a system that is designed to be simple and to have eliminate a lot of the price discrepancies. What the dining company will do is spend time with students to understand what the needs are for students. One of the things that they talked about in the meeting yesterday that I've also observed is there's this series of discounts and series of pricing structures that really, in my estimation, are designed again to pad a reserve account. And again, this is not an indictment on any individual. I want to be clear about that. But this is simply the system that the system that Humboldt State uses in dining is simply not aligned with anything I've seen in my experience or best practice. And really, everything should be affordable. Pricing should be aligned. You should get a drink for the same price in the marketplace that you get in the J. And it shouldn't be more expensive to be able to do so. The other element of this to consider as we talk with students about this, as we go through the bid process, different vendors will share a very wide range of options. Generally, you can have a plan from 14 meals a week to 12 meals to 10 meals to 9 meals. And the point system is generally a discounted point system where, again, the dollar has the same weight. One of the things that we've observed here is that the dollar doesn't have the same weight on the north and south side of campus. So it's really important to solve some of the simple things like that for a meal plan. If you live in one res hall, you should have the same set of options that you do in another res hall. But at the end of the day, the money should be reinvested in quality of food and quality of service. So that's something that will be figured out throughout the process. But again, the system that we have now, it really is just not as basic or as simple as I believe that it could be for students. And at the end of the day, what most dining companies use is a system where when you purchase, if you get a discount, the discount goes back onto your card as a student, as opposed to saying you did get a discount, but you're losing money, or you pay more here if you forget your card that day. There's also an element with respect to food insecurity that we talked about with Aladdin yesterday, where they will have certain amounts of meal swipes set aside for students who need it, but it will not be set up as if you have the purple card, you're the student with food insecurity who had to use it that day. So there's also a system in place like that. One of the things that we asked for last year was a $3 and a $5 meal option for students that wasn't just a piece of bread and a piece of cheese and a piece of meat, but a real meal that was affordable for students who needed it. And so every company that you see will come in with different options for things like that as well.
Thank you, Dr. Meriwether. The chair recognizes Officer Sotomayor. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Dr. Meriwether, for the presentation and your time. The committee, is it going to have a voting system? And if so, who is going to be the tie-breaking vote? Will that be a student or a administrator, faculty, staff member?
When you say tie-breaking vote, you mean because there are 10 people on the committee?
Yeah.
I hadn't thought about that. I don't know. Dr. Turnbow, what's a good way to solve that?
I don't know that I see it as a I vote, you vote, I vote, you vote system. To me, committees in general don't work like that. At least none of the committees that I serve on that have students on it. So if any of you have been on like IPM with me or the orientation committee, or to me, it's the same system. It's more of informative. And a lot of times, I've said this to President Finley, I tend to not even just use the students on any committee that are on there, but usually use that as a guide to then get even more insight from the bigger campus population of students. So I don't think it's these 5 students or these 5 people, these 10 making the decisions. I think it's those 10 people guiding the conversation. And then beyond that, going to touch base with athletes, going to touch base with RHA, like actual more members, going to touch base with, and then bringing that back to see where the common themes are. So I don't know that I see it as a, you get a vote kind of thing.
Thank you, Dr. Turnbow. The chair.
Thank you for the
President Lopez, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe Dr. Meriwether is trying to say something, but he's muted.
No, I'm good. Go ahead and ask your question, please.
Thank you. My next question is relating to the collaboration that has gone on amongst the current system, meaning how has this conversation been working when looping in those stakeholders that rely on housing and rely in the university center? I know you mentioned briefly that you've had some contact with the university center director, and I know you also mentioned that Donyette King will be serving on the committee itself, but have there been any discussions on how this overall decision will truly affect the student life and how, for example, those incoming freshmen will be affected by this new housing change and things of that nature? I'm just wondering who's been completely filled in this conversation.
I can give you the best answer I can to that question. I know that prior to the actual written notice of moving the UC into my organization, I'm aware and believe that the CFO and the UC director have had a number of conversations about this. I know that there's not much I've said today that I personally haven't talked to the dining director or the UC director about all year long. We've probably had, gosh, I've probably been in about 8 meetings about the bookstore move. And I know President Finley has been in, I think, all of those. So if I'm exaggerating with 8, however meetings, Jeremiah, you've been drugged to, or President Finley, I've been drugged to. What I can also say is that we've had this conversation in earnest. The president sent his memo out. We have a meeting scheduled, I think, for next week with Dr. Turnbow, with Dave Nakamura, with me, with the CFO, and with a few others to talk about the transition stuff, so to speak, and what comes with that. What I can also tell you with respect to housing, we've been having lots of communication with incoming students. As Aladdin gets things set up, we'll be sending information both electronically and I believe by mail to new and returning students who will be living on campus in alignment with housing. Another thing that we have to do is get the language of the contract where the housing purchase and the meal plan purchase flows. Right now, it's sort of weird and it's not as aligned as I believe that it could be. And so that's something that we'll work to fix over the next year. I can also tell you that when this is all said and done, the other important element of this is that students continue to be in the process. And so as we figure this out, I go back to what I said with the bookstore. We've kept the president of the student government, both the past president, current president, in meetings and discussions regarding the bookstore. And as things take off with dining, the first thing we did when we met with Aladdin was to reach out to President Finley. And then I know that you all have also had opportunities to participate in those conversations. I know that the UC director has met with Aladdin probably more than anyone to try to help us figure out this process. And so there's just a lot of communication happening between a lot of people. I can't give you an exact number of meetings. I just know that it's a lot of time. And the reason that we're doing it this way is to make sure that we create an experience that really is best and first class for our students. The other thing that I can tell you to answer your question with respect to engagement, that's why the RFP process is going as it is, to be a very student inclusive and student driven process. And so you all will have representation there that will be there. There'll be no different than like the interview for the provost. There'll be public sessions where the dining companies will present and give those opportunities. And then essentially my job is to procure space with respect to the UC and the bookstore move and all that. My job is to procure space for students. The president's job is to approve and allow that procurement of space. And then my job is to get out of the way and let the dean of students work with you all to figure that out. If you look at the structure of the UC board, the leadership of the UC board is actually the chair and the vice chair are actually supposed to be students. And so as we really take that off, and I'm not saying they haven't been in the past, but as we really take off with this, as we look at the restructure of the UC, everything will move with connection to and with direction from student participation. So we're communicating. I don't believe there's any person that can at any point reasonably say that they've not been involved in these conversations, because honestly, we're having a lot of meetings, lots and lots and lots of them.
Thank you, Dr. Meriwether. The chair recognizes Vice President Lopez. You have the floor.
Thank you again, Madam Chair. And again, I appreciate your guys' thoroughness. It's just mind-blowing how it's very extensive, and I really, really appreciate that hard work needs to be recognized. So I think my next and possibly final question is, how are we going to measure the metrics of this transfer? For example, we know that we've just heard rumblings of consistent dissatisfaction with the current way dining is being operated. But I don't know of any study that has said, 80% of students on campus are dissatisfied with the housing meal plans. And so my question is, how going forward will we measure the student satisfaction with how the new process will be running when it comes from meal plans to quality of food, to customer service, to all those other metrics?
Oh, that is such a great question, and I really appreciate you asking. Essentially, the assessment part is it's the work of dining to do. That's a really basic part of dining, to measure that and capture that. These companies are driven by those metrics for two reasons. They want students to be happy, and they want to renew their contract, and so the metric aspect of this is a big part of what they do. I've never worked with a dining company that didn't give you more assessment than you asked for around satisfaction. These companies do things like roundtables with students. They work with campus institutional effectiveness to send out e-surveys. Sometimes there's stuff on social media. Generally, the chefs will usually at least once a month have different students come in and meet with the chef to talk about different things, tasting options. There's systems for tracking complaints. I'll give you an example. When we pushed back on the issue of the backpacks, what students have shared with me anecdotally, in person, and so on and so forth, is the feeling that basically they're being treated like thieves. And we talked about this in one of your meetings, by having to take your backpack off when you go in the cafeteria. So when I pushed back, the response was, oh, well, we've had students steal in the past. When? Last week, last month, last year? When? Well, it's happened in the past. Okay, when? Are there police reports? Help me understand, when did students steal in the cafeteria to warrant this? And if it did happen once or twice, was it an issue of food insecurity? Was it a person who wasn't a student? Give me some details. I've not been able to find that. The way that it works, and again, this goes back to our ability to address what qualifies or disqualifies a company. We can tell them what we want them to measure, and they're going to do it. Why they're going to do it? Because they want you to be happy and keep paying the bill, and because they want to renew the contract once they get it. So we tell these companies that stuff, but most of it is they have it, but it's our job to design and to put that stuff in the RFP. I'll give you an example. One of the lingering things that I've heard about this concept with dining companies is that all dining companies are bad because they leverage prisons and they work with for-profit prisons, and they do horrible things with prison labor. That's one of the things that's been floating around for the last 3 weeks. Maybe y'all haven't heard it, but I've heard it. And so is my response to that.
VP Meriwether, we can't hear you. Your signal is going in and out.
How about now?
We can hear you now.
Okay,
So
sorry about that.
the last part to what you said.
Okay, the last part to what I said was just like we can put in the RFP qualifiers and disqualifiers, We can outline the assessment that we expect and they will do it. And then the other thing that I've been hearing about, at least in the last couple of weeks, is that all dining companies are bad because they have abusive practices with prison labor. Well, that's another thing, which, and as I said, you may have not heard it, but it keeps coming to me. So what I can say is it's really simple. We put in the RFP, if you work with for-profit prisons or you do anything like that, you are disqualified. It's really that simple. I also conferred with Aladdin to make sure, and Aladdin only serves college campuses. They do not have any contracts or any relation with prison labor. And it was really important to understand that from a social justice standpoint. So I get that. And I want to make sure that we acknowledge those elements of our campus as we do this. So that's why having students participate in the RFP process, particularly the qualifier and disqualifier stage where we design the RFP, is extremely important. So that can handle assessment and anything else that we prioritize.
Thank you, Dr. Meriwether. Is there any more discussion at this time? You can go ahead and raise your hand now. The chair recognizes President Finley. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, VP Meriwether, for coming today and really explaining this whole process and really detailing it out for us and in the whole board of directors right now. I think it was really appreciative, and I know a lot of folks appreciate just how much information was available and really readily accessible for students to really have access to. And there's a number of students in the audience as well who might be interested in taking this up or even being a part of the dining process and the RFP process. I don't have a question. I just really want to thank you. And if there are no more questions, really kind of close out this discussion. In saying that if folks are interested, again, please follow up with me. I'll be working with staff, with Casey, our coordinator, to create this application process for folks to apply if they don't want to reach out to me directly, so that we can get you interviewed. And on the dining process, the timeline right now is, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Meriwether, but July 30th is when you want everything kind of together for this part.
Yeah, I need the student co-chair, please, by July 30th. Once
Okay.
we have the co-chair appointed, then we'll work until September to select the other students on the process, and we'll work with you and with Marissa, I believe the RHA president, to close the deal on the other students who participate. But right now, the priority is just to get the chairs. So I don't need 5 students right now. I just need the co-chair.
Okay, you probably have 2 students. I myself won't probably be the chair, but we can try to get someone else on there who's really active. Okay, thank you. And thank you, Madam Chair, for yielding time to me. I yield my time back to the chair.
Thank you, President Finley. The chair recognizes Vice President Lopez. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just like to express my interest for this chair position, and I would like to let the board know and VP Meriwether that I will be definitely applying for this position. I have, over the past 48 hours, I have done a lot of contemplating on it, and I'll be doing a lot more contemplating on it. But for right now, I am very, very interested in this position, and it is a massive project that I think needs the greatest amount of attention possible. So thank you.
Thank you, for President Finley and Vice President Lopez. I encourage you to please talk to President Finley. And I want to just reiterate the important part of this process. Do not underestimate the part of the process where we talk about what goes in the bid. I think a lot of times people want to focus on, oh, well, you know, this is the part where we review the bids. This is the part where we get to do the taste testing. But please do not underestimate the importance of being in the part where we set this bid, because what's important is that we make sure that we set standards that align with Humboldt State. As an example, if the bid is where we would say, all right, no plastic water bottles. The bid is where we really get our teeth in sustainability. Writing the bid is where we set our standards for student employment. That's what's really critical. And if we can do that in a way that really tailors this to Humboldt State. You know, I told Aladdin yesterday that there are a lot of things about Humboldt State that are very different. And I don't mean that in a bad way when I say it. I mean that to say that Humboldt State has a lot of unique qualities, but we cannot cheat ourselves out of the opportunity to establish those elements within the bid process. So I thank everyone for their interest. Thank you for the time, and I truly encourage everyone to participate. And one shout out to everyone who got up at 8 a.m. to brave that meeting yesterday. Thank you so very much for that. And thank you to President Finley for all the meetings that we pulled you into as well.
Thank you, Dr. Meriwether. Is there any more discussion at this time? Seeing no further discussion, we will go ahead and jump back to the item that we left on. So thank you for joining us, Dr. Meriwether, and thank you for the information.
Thank you. You all have a great meeting.
Okay, so we are jumping back to discussion after Officer Sotomayor's presentation and second reading of the resolution. So discussion is now in order regarding Officer Sotomayor's presentation. I will start a speakers list, and if you would like to speak, please raise your hand to be added to the speakers list. With that being said, is there any discussion at this time? The chair recognizes President Finley. You have the floor.
Madam Chair. So for this one, again, it's just, I don't have a problem with the substance or the outcome. When do I need to have this memo sent out to folks?
If someone would like to respond, you can go ahead and raise your hand. The chair recognizes Officer Sotomayor. You have the floor.
So a time wasn't identified. That was obviously an oversight that I see now. Thank you. So perhaps we could contact amend to include contacting Amanda for what time would be most helpful to the program to receive to have the memo sent out. That's my initial thought, or just use a standard 30-day something like that window. That would be enough for you without it being too much.
The chair recognizes President Finley. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Officer Sotomayor. Yes, I think that works as well. Either approach, just so that way I know when to get this out, and I can kind of detail it out in my on my end.
Thank you, President Finley. Is there any more discussion? Seeing none, discussion is closed. I would now like to ask if there is a motion on the floor. The chair recognizes Officer Sotomayor. You have the floor.
Yes, I would like to motion to approve the resolution with the amendment that, let's see, in the second resolved, that the AS president issues a 1 to 3 paragraph memo, yada, 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 signed by the board of directors within 30 days of passing the resolution. Yes, or 30 days at the latest. With that amendment. Thank you. Sorry, I'm like watching my apologies.
That is okay. That motion is in order. Officer Sotomayor has moved to adopt the resolution with the amendment that within 30 days, the memo be released by the AS president. And it would also be approving the resolution titled Resolution to Support the Former Hilltop Marketplace be designated as a food sovereignty lab and cultural workspace. I would now like to ask if there is a second. The chair recognizes Vice President Lopez.
I second this motion.
Thank you, Vice President Lopez. It has been moved by Officer Sotomayor to adopt the resolution titled Resolution to Support the Former Hilltop Marketplace be designated as a food sovereignty lab and cultural workspace, with the amendment that the memo come out after 30 days of being passed, and Vice President Lopez seconded the motion. Debate is now in order regarding the motion on the floor. We will begin debate with the original proposer of the motion. So Officer Sotomayor, you have the floor.
Yeah, perhaps a clarification that it would be, I'm trying to, because I'm thinking like 30 days is the maximum amount of time, not the starting point, is what I'm trying to say, I believe.
So point of clarification, would you like to change the language from within 30 days to at the latest 30 days, or?
Yes, please.
So I'm going to go ahead and do that one again and get another second. So there is a motion on the floor by Officer Sotomayor to approve the resolution titled Resolution to support the former Hilltop Marketplace be designated as a food sovereignty lab and cultural workspace, with the amendment that the memo from President Finley come out 30 days at the latest after the resolution being passed. Is there a second on the floor? The chair recognizes Vice President Lopez.
I'd like to second this motion.
Thank you, Vice President Lopez. It has been moved by Officer Sotomayor to adopt the resolution titled Resolution to support the former Hilltop Marketplace be designated as a food sovereignty lab and cultural workspace, with the amendment that the memo from President Finley comes at the latest 30 days. And Vice President Lopez has been the second to that motion. Debate is now in order regarding the motion on the floor. We will begin debate with the original proposer of the motion. Officer Sotomayor, you have the floor.
I have no items for debate.
Thank you, Officer Sotomayor. Is there any more debate? You can go ahead and raise your hand to be recognized by the chair. Seeing none, we will move on to a vote to adopt the resolution titled Resolution to support the former Hilltop Marketplace be designated as a food sovereignty lab and cultural workspace, with the added amendment. Board Commissioner Park, may you please do a roll call vote?
Yes. President Finley.
Aye.
Vice President Lopez.
Aye.
I believe Vice President Lamar is still out of service, but I will ask Vice President Lamar. Okay. Officer Sotomayor.
Aye.
Officer Barantes.
Aye.
Representative Mort.
Aye.
Representative Alvarez is away at tutoring as well. So Representative Flores.
Aye.
Representative Floyd.
Aye.
You have a unanimous approval or adoption of the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Coordinator Park. The ayes have it and the motion carries. The resolution titled Resolution to support the former Hilltop Marketplace be designated as a food sovereignty lab and cultural workspace, with the added amendment, is adopted. We will continue with new business. Continuing with our new business, our next item of business after the time certain item is a piece of legislation titled An Act to Formalize the Associated Student Social Justice and Equity Committee. This legislation is co-authored by the Social Justice and Equity Officer Sotomayor and myself. Due to my inability to be an unbiased facilitator for this item of business due to me being a co-author, I will now be stepping down as chair, and our vice chair, Representative Floyd, will step into the role of chair for this business item.
Thank you, Vice President Cuellar. We will continue to the first reading of this legislation. The board will receive a presentation from Officer Sadie Moore and consider adoption of legislation that will create an Associated Students Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Committee to be codified within the AS Administrative Code and Constitution. Officer Sadie Moore, you now have the floor to give your first reading.
Thank you. All right. Let me read the right one this time. So this is the draft. Essentially, I wanted a lot of feedback on this, so please feel free to give as much feedback as you want, basically. So again, this is called An Act to Formalize the Associated Student Social Justice and Equity Committee, and I will begin. Whereas the Associated Students AS Board of Directors at Humboldt State University is the single recognized voice for over 6,500 students, and whereas the mission of Associated Students of Humboldt State University serves to, quote, assist in the protection of rights and interests of the individual student and the student body, and to stimulate the educational, social, physical, and cultural well-being of the university committee, end quote, and whereas the Associated Students has defined, quote, social justice as, quote, is a concept of fair and just relations between the individual and society. This is measured by the explicit and tacit terms for the distribution of wealth, opportunities for personal activity, and social privileges, end quote. And whereas AS champions the principles of shared governance, and whereas collaboration is identified as a critical part of the shared governance and is defined as, quote, a cooperative process that synthesizes and integrates the talents, resources, information, and expertise of two or more persons to accomplish a common goal. The process of collaboration is interactive and dynamic and is characterized by a balancing power when participants have unequal status, end quote. And whereas under shared governance, quote, roles and responsibilities are defined, negotiated, and redefined according to projects, assignments, committees, and or functions rather than vested positions, end quote. And whereas on September 24th, 2019, the Associated Students Board of Directors passed an act to clarify the commitment of Associated Students of Humboldt State, which included a resolve stating, quote, the Associated Students Board of Directors request and give authorization to the Social Justice and Equity Officer to establish the AS Social Justice Committee as they see fit, and upon the creation of the parameters of the AS Social Justice Committee, be it automatically enacted, end quote. And whereas the recommended name for the Associated Students Social Justice and Equity Committee is Associated Students Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee to encourage collaboration with the President's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, led by the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, in assessing student needs and ensuring ongoing projects for diversity, equity, and reflect those needs. And whereas ODEI identifies their mission as focused on a systems change in support of equitable and inclusive learning and community spaces. Examples of this strategic approach to dismantling institutional and systemic racism include involvement with ongoing training for all faculty, staff, and administrators, as well as implementing new policy and revising inequitable practices that create institutional racism. In addition to offering educational opportunities for the HSU community, ODI supports the recruitment and retention of faculty and staff of color. Finally, as a campus community, ODI's mission is to strive forward with asset-based equity, student success, and student-centered initiatives that create equity, value diversity, and inclusion. Whereas together, ODI and associated students can ensure staff, faculty, and administrators remain up to date on projects that support equitable and inclusive learning and community spaces. Therefore, be it enacted that the AS Board of Directors resolves that the change and organizational chart for the Associated Students Social Justice and Equity Committee be accepted and adopted pending the first meeting excuse me, of the committee, wherein the charge will be reviewed and edits will be made with the collaboration of all members present. Associate students will then review any recommended changes during a meeting of the executives committee and vote whether or not to adopt the changes. Resolved that the associated students alter the administrative code to include a new section titled Associate Students Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee containing the following. So I'm just going to jump down to section the first 0.1. The Associated Students Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee's charge is to engage students at Humboldt State University using principles of shared governance in ongoing critical examination and reflection needed to make essential changes in the academic policies, practices, and behaviors that result in inequity, exclusion, and social injustices at HSU. So just like pound number sign 0.2, the Associated Students Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Committee shall be chaired by the Associated Students Social Justice and Equity Officer. The structure will be reviewed every other academic year and revised as necessary to ensure it is demonstrating values of diversity, equity, and inclusion. 0.03, the chair will be responsible for A, coordinating the meetings of the Associated Students Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Committee, B, scheduling and organizing meetings for ASD. I see it looks like that was an error. Communicating with the ODI about projects, potential areas of collaboration and student needs, and D, staying abreast on current issues and legislation affecting diversity, equity, and inclusion on the college campus and beyond. .04, ASDIC will be responsible for coordinating public forums for underrepresented students to voice their concerns and provide feedback on campus issues pertaining to diversity and inclusion. A detailed report of the forum's findings will be created by the committee and submitted to the Associate Students President, the ODEI, and made public. .05, ASDIC will regularly examine the professional development content being provided to students to ensure it reflects values of diversity, equity, inclusion. The committee will make recommendations about changes to the content in reports sent to the executive committee. .06, ASDIC will partner with the ODEI on projects to A, keep the campus up to date on current events regarding diversity, equity, inclusion, B, inform students and staff on how they can participate in such projects, C, ensure continuity between faculty and staff perceptions of student need and student need, D, engage in the thoughtful examinations of academic policies, practices, and behaviors to ensure they're meeting the standards of diversity, equity, and inclusion. .07, ASDIC will never have more active subcommittees than the current membership is capable of managing. If a subcommittee has no members, it is to be considered temporarily inactive due to increased membership. .08, ASDIC will begin with 2 subcommittees. Subcommittees may be added, altered, or removed at any point by vote. Subcommittees will provide reports to ASDIC, which will then travel out to the students in collaboration with ODEI. So our first subcommittee is going to be inclusive and diverse education, and I'm recommending that it begin with 2 task forces, combating campus anti-Blackness and developing decolonized institutions. And the second subcommittee would be called Professional Development and Enrichment. .09, ASDIC will be composed of the Social Justice and Equity Officer, the Student Affairs Vice President, the Environment and Sustainability Officer, an ODEI student representative, a Learning Center student representative, a VETS student representative, the STRC student representative, SJEIC student representative, a student representative from each CCAE, and an ADPIC student representative pending ADPIC institutionalization as a CCAE, and 3 student representatives with the yearly commitment. Resolved that the Associated Students alter the Associated Students Constitution, Section B, Item 6, to include the Social Justice and Equity Officer shall sit on the Associated Students Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. Resolved that copies of this resolution be sent to, but not limited to, University President Tom Jackson Jr., the Office of Interim Dean of Students, Ebony Turnbow, Vice President of Enrollment and Management, Jason L. Meriwether, the Interim Executive Director of the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, Edelmira Reynoso, the Interim Associate Vice President of Student Success, Stephen St. Ange, every Cultural Center for Academic Excellence Coordinator, Veterans Enrollment and Transition Services, the Coordinator of the Social Justice, Equity, and Inclusion Center, the Lumberjack, and El Leñador. And then if we continue down, I want to show that I created a recommended org chart. Org chart might not be the right answer because I'm not really trying to define any hierarchy here among the members of the committee. I mostly wanted to show how this would kind of sort of go out to the students with the little vision that we're having of a newsletter. So you can see all of the groups that I listed represented here in the kind of roots of this chart. And then going outward, it comes out of our committee. It joins with the DEIC, which is led by Office of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion. Our information joins together and it goes out to in something, there's no name yet, but I just wrote an HSU Diversity, Equity, Inclusion newsletter. And then you'll also see on the upper left, the committees, the subcommittees going out from ASDIC. And then after that are just my works cited. So that is my presentation, and please provide any feedback as you see fit. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Officer Sotomayor. Discussion is now in order regarding Officer Sotomayor's presentation. If you would like to speak, please raise your hand to be recognized by the chair. President Finley, your floor is open to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Officer Sotomayor, for this wonderful presentation. I think that it makes me really happy to see this work come to the board again. Well, not again, but come to the board, because I think that just me seeing this from this past year, I can't express my joy. It's like seeing it come again and seeing it really come to fruition. It makes me, it's like full circle almost. And so I'm extremely glad that you decided to pick this up as during your term as Officer of Social Justice and Equity, to really make this a thing. As far as the resolves, I think that they're beautiful. I like your whole spread chart. I mean, your spreadsheet, maybe we can call it, of how it's all going to be organized, kind of. Great. I love it all.
Thank you, President Finley. Vice President Lopez, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. My question is relating to the ad pick area where you've mentioned it is their representative is pending on their certification of a CCAE. So I wonder if that could be removed, and just because I know you do have the stipulation that all CCAEs have a representative. So with that being said, does that mean the ad pick would have two representatives, one from the CCAE and one from their original designation? Yeah, so that's my question or feedback. Thank you, Chair.
Is there any more discussion? Officer Sotomayor, you have the floor.
Thank you, Jeremiah, or thank you, President Finley, and thank you, Vice President Lopez. For Vice President Lopez, I was concerned that if I didn't explicitly mention ad pick somewhere, they wouldn't be included because they're technically not, to my knowledge, a CCAE yet. So I'm not really sure how to write in, because I do see what you're saying. I'm not really sure how then to write that so that it kind of meets both of what we're thinking. Maybe that's something we could just meet one-on-one to talk about if you'd like. I just wanted to respond regardless. And then I yield my time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any more discussion on this presentation? Okay. Seeing no further discussion, discussion is closed. Thank you, Officer Sotomayor, and Vice President Cuellar will now resume her role as chair.
Thank you, Representative Floyd. Our next item of business is a resolution titled Call for the Restructuring of the University Police Department. The board will receive a presentation and consider a resolution calling for collaborative efforts between the University Senate and associated students, the formation of a task force to create a report that investigates practices and policies of the University Police Department that would inform advocacy to establish social-based services instead of armed police response. This resolution was authored by Representative Guerrero, President Finley, and Officer Sotomayor. Representative Guerrero, you now have the floor to present your first reading. Representative Guerrero, you have the floor.
Oops, apologies, Madam Chair. I forgot to unmute myself. So first, let's talk about the problem at hand. Our nation is facing an injustice, and that injustice is in relations to our policing systems in the United States. Police brutality has been a apparent problem within our nation for decades and for even centuries. And it's a problem that has gone unaddressed for a very long time. And it's something that has been targeted towards our communities of color and decimated those communities, most notably our Black communities. So the murder of George Floyd was a reminder of these injustices, but again, make no mistake, these injustices have been prevalent for a very long time in the United States, and it is time for us to take incremental steps to addressing this problem. So HSU, being an institution that primarily serves Black, Indigenous, and persons of color, as representatives of this university, it is our obligation to heed the calls of our students to ensure that safety is a equitable thing on this campus, and that all of our students feel safe when they come onto this campus. So essentially what this resolution calls for is an investigation from a task force towards better practices and policies, and to help restructure how our university police department functions on Humboldt State University. So that's the first thing. The second thing is to urge for the adoption of this resolution within the University Senate. And so what that will essentially do is create a cohesive and collaborative environment for both student government and for both faculty and administrators, so that we could address this problem and so that this problem is met with solutions. Third is for a push for a similar proposition, and I'm already in talks with people about this in the Cal State Student Association, CSSA. And I think that this is something that the Cal State Student Association will get behind. So yeah, that's a little background on what this resolution is. So just to get right into the reading, can you just go to the first whereas, Madam Chair? Thank you. So the subject is for the restructuring of the University Police Department. Whereas the Associated Students AS Board of Directors of Humboldt State HSU is a single recognized voice for over 6,500 students. And whereas the mission of the Associated Students of Humboldt State University serves to assist in the protection of rights and interests of the individual students and the student body, and to stimulate the educational, social, physical, and cultural well-being of the university community. And whereas Black, Indigenous, and persons of color across the nation feel unrest and face brutality at the hands of police. And whereas the mission statement of the HSU University Police Department is to ensure that our campus remains a safe place to learn, live, and work. Whereas close to 1,000 people have been shot and killed every year since 2015 by police officers. And whereas Black, Indigenous, and persons of color, particularly Black people, are disproportionately shot and killed and are 1.2 times to 2.5 times more likely to be killed by police officers than persons identifying as white. And whereas in the fall of 2019, persons of color represented 55.4% of Humboldt State student demographics. And whereas the Humboldt State students identifying as Black, Indigenous, and persons of color are at an increased risk of harm during occurrences involving the presence of police. And whereas much of the harm done to students identifying as Black, Indigenous, and persons of color by police takes place during welfare checks and when nonviolent offenses occur that demonstrate no need for an armed officer to be present. And whereas Humboldt State's 2019 annual security report shows the majority of offenses from 2016 to 2019 were alcohol and drug related, compared to other similar sized campuses which report higher violent offenses or lower drug and alcohol related offenses. And whereas the UPD's budget for 2019 and 2020 was $2.9 million, which demonstrates a steady increase from 2015 to 2016 when it was $2.5 million. And whereas the mission of Humboldt State's Risk and Safety Department is to aid in the identification and evaluation of risk, to facilitate the selection and application of the best risk management techniques to mitigate risks and to monitor the results. And whereas Humboldt State's Risk Management and Safety Department of 2015 and 2016 had a budget of $506.7 thousand, which was decreased in 2016 and 2017 to $443.5 thousand, and has only slightly increased since then to $498,000 during 2019 to 2020. And whereas Humboldt State has failed to meet the basic standards of harm reduction on campus, of which the bare minimum is to install sharps collection containers in all single-stall bathrooms on campus and other CSU campuses, such as Sacramento State have done. And whereas a program that center harm reduction and education provide more support to those who struggle with drug and alcohol use and law enforcement with a criminalized perspective is capable of. And whereas Program 1033 legally requires the Department of Defense to make some items of equipment available to local law enforcement, firefighting, Homeland Security, and emergency management agencies. Whereas in 2019, interview with Lost Coast Outpost, President Jackson stated with regards to enrollment and the HSU budget, start of quotes, what the budget deficit means is we refocus and align our resources towards those things that are actually growing or we want to grow. So in a way, it's a very good strategic time as an institution to reflect upon itself and ask, where do we really want to put our resources so that we can be innovative and grow and be more marketable to students that happen to be out here and wanting to come to this campus. It's a good conversation to have, end quote. Resolved, in accordance with the HSU University Police Department mission statement, Associated Student calls for the formation of a task group charged with investigating areas of restructuring and change to practices and policies within the University Police Department that adequately address concerns for the safety and well-being of Humboldt State students. The task force shall investigate practices and policies such as, but not limited to, disarmament of campus police, rejection of lethal equipment funneled through Program 1033, and establishment of social-based services founded on harm reduction for emergency calls made to UPD, and do not require an officer present to further such mission. Further be it resolved that associated students, University Senate student representatives, introduce this resolution to the University Senate and urge for the adoption of this resolution in the University Senate to begin deliberations between campus administration and associated students. Further be it resolved, pending resolution adoption in the University Senate, associated students will create a task force within 60 days of adoption in coordination with campus administrators charged with investigating safe and effective policies and practices to the University Police Department. Further be it resolved that the task force shall create deliberate guidelines that outline the steps to be taken, and a part of those guidelines shall include public forums to capture some of the campus community's comments and concerns. Further be it resolved, membership of such task force shall be composed of at least 2 appointed students of the association and a member of the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion to bridge cohesion between faculty, administrators, staff, and the student body. Further be it resolved that the task force shall complete its report no later than April 2021. Further be it resolved that the completion of the task force's report, findings, and recommendations shall be submitted to associated students for resolution adoption. Further be it resolved that associated students executive committee will meet no later than 30 days after receiving the report to review the contents of the task force's report and draft a resolution in response to the report's findings. Further be it resolved that the Associated Students Board of Directors shall create a resolution that aims for the disarmament of CSU police, implementation of social-based services founded on harm reduction, and the rejection of Program 1033 to pass through CSSA by collaborating with other CSU campuses in its development. Further be it resolved, any additional goals and objectives that are developed through collaboration with other CSU campuses may also be included in the final resolution for CSSA. Resolved, copies of this resolution to be sent to Humboldt State University President Tom Jackson, Jr., Vice President of Administrative and Finance Douglas V. Dawes, Vice President for Enrollment Management Jason Meriwether, Dean of Students Ebony Turnbull, President's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council Chair Dr. Reynoso, the Lumberjack, Lenador, the Lumberjack is repeated twice, all coordinators of the Cultural Centers for Academic Excellence, and they're listed below. So something I like to add on top of this proposed resolution is that I would like to rescind my request for a second reading, and I think we should go forward with the second reading, just so we ensure that this process is being carried out in a timely manner. And that's pretty much my resolution.
Thank you, Representative Guerrero. Discussion is now in order regarding Representative Guerrero's presentation. I will start a speakers list, and if you wish to speak, you can go ahead and raise your hand to be added to the speakers list. With that being said, are there any speakers at this time?
Yeah, my apologies. Oh, sorry. Was I supposed to raise my hand?
You can go ahead, you're good.
Oh, okay, awesome. I would like to give some acknowledgements to both Roman and Jeremiah, who have been working very deliberately with me on this resolution, and they've really contributed a lot to this resolution, and it's something that I am very proud of, and thank you guys for your help.
Is there any more discussion at this time? Seeing none, discussion is closed. The chair recognizes Officer Sotomayor. You have the floor.
Yeah, since this is the first reading, I just wanted to encourage everyone here, especially our students who are here, to give any feedback. Are you in favor of this? Are you opposed to this? You know, we want to hear from you with this resolution, especially. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Officer Sotomayor. The chair recognizes External Affairs Representative Guerrero. You have the floor.
Yeah, my apologies. I forgot to mention that. So a quick question, Madam Chair. So the resolved to add the people who we're going to send this out to, is that already a part of it, or should I make a recommendation for someone's motion to add it to the resolution, or has it already been added?
So because there's going to be a second reading to this resolution between right now, so once the meeting ends at our next meeting, you can go ahead and work with your co-authors to formalize that amendment. I think it was added to this draft of the resolution so that folks would know that it was an intended amendment, if that makes sense.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Guerrero. Is there any more discussion at this time? The chair recognizes Vice President Lopez. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have one question for the authors of this resolution, and that is, what steps are there any steps when it comes to consulting? This isn't my field, so bear with me here. With consulting with any other experts or people that might have other insight on a resolution on this to make it more effective. For example, I believe it's the prerogative of the current interim chief to also break down a lot of these injustices. So is there any way that, or has there been any collaboration with them to maybe brainstorm some ideas or any other resolutions just to further strengthen this resolution in ways that I personally can't foresee or any other members of the board don't have experience with?
Thank you, Vice President Lopez. The chair recognizes Representative Guerrero. You have the floor.
Yeah, so originally this resolution looked very different from the get-go. We essentially had a resolution that had what we already wanted. And so we presented that draft and that outline to Vice President Meriwether, Dean of Students Ebony Turnbow, and the person below the university police chief. I forgot the position name. And Vice President Dowles as well. And we had a really constructive conversation, and our resolution was formulated into developing a more focused and centered task group that will work and then give us recommendations at the end. So to answer your question, yeah, we've been trying to keep those people who actually make and implement these changes into the loop. And what we found is that we're in a lot of agreement, and yeah, there's like a lot of passion on both sides to get this done. So yeah, lots of exchanges between us and them.
Thank you, Representative Guerrero. Is there any more discussion at this time? The chair recognizes Representative Moore. You have the floor.
Hi, I just had one quick question. Would this resolution call for like a complete disarmament of the UPD, or would it just be officers that respond to calls?
Oh, sorry.
You can go ahead, Representative Guerrero. You have the floor.
I'm like really bad at this. So this resolution doesn't call for either. What it's saying is that, hey, we're going to develop a task group to look into that matter, whether we could do that and whether that is a effective and safe sort of standard to follow. So the working of the task group could result in them recommending, oh, let's disarm all of our campus police, or let's disarm only campus police on patrol and responding to non-lethal 911 calls. So it could vary depending on that task force recommendation. It's not really constrained to one thing. It's, but yeah, if that answers your question.
Okay, yeah, that did. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Guerrero. Is there any more discussion at this time? The chair recognizes President Finley. You have the floor.
Yeah, Madam Chair. I'll just say that if folks are wanting to give feedback, necessarily not in this public forum, I think you pretty much all have access to all the co-authors' emails. If not, I mean, I'm pretty sure we're sure to be add them. We'll add them into the chat right now, so that way folks can give feedback that way as well.
Thank you, President Finley. Is there any more discussion at this time? If everyone could really quickly to our chat, we had a member of the public leave a comment in the chat, and I'm going to go ahead and read that just in case so that we can all kind of hear it out loud. So the comment reads, if it could be possible to loop in housing's resident advisors and HSU's student-led check-it for the task group since they are familiar with patrolling and de-escalation. So that was the comment in the chat, in case anyone missed it. Is there any more discussion at this time? The chair recognizes President Finley. You have the floor.
I guess just to respond to the comment really quickly, I think all those options are definitely going to be explored. I wouldn't say that we wouldn't be opposed to that. I would say that we should talk as co-authors to figure out what that might look like, and then give a response to you all at our next board meeting.
Thank you, President Finley. Is there any more discussion at this time? Seeing none, discussion is closed and we will move on with the agenda. Thank you, Representative Guerrero, for giving your first reading. Continuing with our agenda, the board will receive a presentation on the 2020-2021 Associated Students budget and discuss possible adjustments that could be made in light of circumstances presented by COVID-19 and an adapted fall semester. A presentation will be given by Administrative Vice President Lopez, and there will be the opportunity to discuss the presentation afterwards. With that, Vice President Lopez, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I will be sharing my screen to display the presentation. Okay, so the purpose of this presentation is to bring further clarity and transparency to the budgeting process and to answer any questions that the board may have and any questions or concerns that the public may have regarding the financial aspects and workings of the associated students. So with that being said, I'll begin. So to start off, we have the budgeting process. Right here, we have a timeline link to this. This PowerPoint will be linked in the chat later on in the meeting. And so anybody has access to it, you can go ahead, and all these links are active and will take you directly to a document or website. So the way the process works is that in our codes, it lists out that the application is sent out to those who previously received funding. It's also available on the AS website. So those applications are sent to the AS Finance Committee, previously labeled the Board of Finance. And the Finance Committee reviews each application and hold meetings with those who apply to it. Once that review process has gone through, the Finance Committee will relay that same information on their decision of what their recommendation will be to each applicant or group applying, or student organization applying. So then those allocations are then able to be appealed to by the Board of Finance to hold another meeting, which will then be where the Board of Finance or the Finance Committee will then hear out those appeals again. After that, the official Finance Committee recommendation will be sent to the Board of Directors, and at the next Board of Directors meeting, the organization that has applied for that funding can then also appeal to have the Board of Directors review any of the financial aspects and the budget overall, which is then approved by the Board of Directors. And after that, the president of the association will then write a memo and send it to the university president, where it will then be approved and signed. So the nuances about this are in our fiscal codes. Each of these is a little description. So in our section 3, we have our timelines and so on and so forth. In the budget timeline here, we have how the budgeting process worked for the 2019-2020 year, and the specific dates of exactly how the process works when the budgeting season begins and ends. That does change from year to year because dates change from year to year. So moving forward, we have the factors that affected our current budget that is currently available on the AS website. And so these are pretty much all of the major factors, which is the anticipated 20% enrollment decline and the CSU Category 2 fees lawsuit, which is a lawsuit that is being taken against the entire CSU system, not specifically HSU. And so that has to do with the refunding of those fees. The anticipated 20% decline in enrollment is in response to a increased decline that HSU has seen in general in their enrollment throughout the years. The Chancellor's Office guidance is another big factor that we're waiting on, and that's regarding the Apodaca v. White, also known as the San Marcos lawsuit. We're waiting for direct direction from the Chancellor's Office on how to interpret this decision, but because we are required by law to submit our budget by the first week of May, we could not wait for the Chancellor's guidance to draft our budget. So we had to present it with the best practices of residing on the side of caution. Executive Order 1068 states the ways that student organizations are defined on campus, along with the nuances on what are the requirements for student organizations and how the funding must work with how Category 2 fees will be allocated to them. The COVID-19 pandemic has also been taken into account with traveling expenses and other event expenses and how those will affect the needs of students in a virtual space. So moving on here, also, I forgot to mention, this is also the link to our current budget in addition to where it can be found on the AS website. So our current budget activity, meaning what can happen within these next couple months to affect the budget. And that's pretty much the AS Collabs funds and the AS Club grants, which are two pots of money that you'll see in our budget that have been specifically allocated a substantial amount to fund certain programs. So this AS Collabs funding is what will be now known as the AS Presents and is being managed by our Student Affairs Vice President Lamar. He'll be directly overseeing with his committee to allocate these funds and making the process on how they will be allocated in a proper way. When it comes to the AS Club grant, that'll be myself and Executive Director Lund, who will be creating the application process, which, like I've mentioned before, will be available August 22nd during a training that we'll be working with the Clubs and Activities Office to bring on. Now, another big thing was the budget modification factors, which is how will the budget be immediately changed in small ways. We won't be making any major overhauls as long as there's not any major inconsistencies with the fall census and the Chancellor's office. So the way these will work out is we'll receive the fall census, which is slotted to be sometime in September. The Chancellor office will be giving their guidance hopefully around that time. We don't have a solid timeline for when that'll be coming out, but we are hoping to receive it in the next month or so. Another thing to remember is our space allocation. As mentioned before previously in this meeting, that the University Center and the Nelson Hall is currently being allocated out, and how that might affect student needs, we currently don't know. So when that comes around, the budget will go under review again. The greater campus-wide discussion is meant to drastically comb through what student needs are financially, employment-wise, and just overall factors, so we can truly understand how students need to be funded. So yeah, that'll be a major factor as well. So our planned action on how this will affect later on budgets and budgets for the future, and mainly the 2021-2022 budget will be, we'll be planning on working with the university business service providers to develop AS student employment policies and procedures that currently have never been laid out in our codes. So that'll be a major project that I'll be working on this year, is developing ways that we can truly bring student employees in a clear way so there isn't any confusion like there has been in these past few years. Like I said, again, determining that student need is another way is through the Student Union Task Force and developing a robust student union. This Student Union Task Force is going to be a coalition, comprised of HSU student leaders to work on designating the student union and again, addressing the needs and their financial requirements to continue to meet those needs. A big factor in meeting these student needs is collaborating with campus partners to meet them. So that means through departments, with student organizations, and new transfers to student organizations is going to be vital to determining all of how student fees will be allocated, and student employment, especially as it's become a very prominent, not issue, but factor in the recent months. So it'll be truly addressing those needs through our campus partners, because AS can't address all of student needs alone, and we strongly are going to be encouraging this collaboration in the future. So this page is an additional information page for any questions you guys may have. I know I've listed a lot of services and documents in this presentation. So this is pretty much all of the little nuance information that can affect it. So right now I'd like to open it up for questions for any students or board members that might be wondering about some of the things that I've recently mentioned.
Thank you, Vice President Lopez, for your presentation. If anyone would like to ask any questions or make any comments regarding Vice President Lopez's presentation, you could go ahead and raise your hand right now to be added to the speakers list and to be recognized. Is there any discussion at this time? The chair recognizes President Finley. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Vice President Lopez. You did a phenomenal job really outlining and detailing all that out for the Board of Directors as well as students of the association who are in the audience. I just want to thank you and really do appreciate the amount of time and effort that you've been putting in on this topic.
Thank you, President Finley. Is there any more discussion? Seeing no further discussion, discussion is closed and we will continue with our agenda. Thank you, Vice President Lopez, for your presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One last thing I would like to say, these are the students and any contacts that, if any of you guys have any questions about any of the things that I mentioned that you might not feel comfortable with or you come upon later, please don't hesitate to reach out to anybody on this list. Like I said, this presentation is public and we'll feel free to click on anything. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Lopez. I would recommend that you unshare your screen right now so that our board counterpart could share your screen. So our last item of business for today is an action item which will determine the dates and times for the required fall orientation for the board. In addition to the summer training sessions that we've been having, the board will have a required orientation before the fall semester begins. According to AS Government Code Section 8.01, failure to attend orientations and retreats may levy a 1-point violation against the board member for each day absent. The proposed dates are currently Tuesday, August 11th to Friday, August 14th from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. and 1 to 3 p.m. The time in between would be dedicated to a lunch. We will begin with a discussion about the proposed dates. If you would like to speak, please raise your hand. Is there any discussion at this time? The chair recognizes President Finley. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So for these required fall orientation for the board, will there? I'm assuming this is going to be online as well, and just virtual. I guess I don't know if this is a question for you or a question for the coordinator, Madam Chair.
Thank you, President Finley. Would Board Coordinator Parks like to give more clarification on that, or Executive Director Lund?
You would be correct, and these would be virtual trainings. At this point, the Associated Students has not been notified of on-campus activity with our office, which may differ from something like the Residence Life, which I think is potentially working on a hybrid kind of orientation. But succinctly, yes, ours would be virtual.
Thank you, Board Coordinator Park. Is there any more discussion?
I can't raise my hand.
Go ahead, Board Coordinator Park.
Okay. I just wanted to add that like these board meetings with proper notice to the chair, if an absence is needed, they can also be excused. And so I just wanted to add that as kind of a temperament, as this will be kind of the first required thing that you can see Section 8 of the government code, that there are a number of different ways to potentially levy points. And with the accrual of 3 points within one semester, a board member could be considered for removal from the board. It is not a shall be removed, but just wanted to give a little bit more insight to like the requirement and what your government code states. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Coordinator Park. I would just like to echo what Board Coordinator Park said. If there's ever any like circumstances that are out of like your reach, And that can like always like work, or if like you have like car troubles on the way or something that like you can simply not control, feel free to email me. I'll go ahead and drop my email in the chat, but most of you guys have that form to contact me, but always feel free to email me. Is there any more discussion at this time? Seeing no further discussion, oh, the chair recognizes President Finley. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And so I guess for orientation, what I've been seeing at the CSSA level and just from among the other AS leaders, it's like sometimes they do like for their orientation, they'll have their orientation, but then they'll send like for the food, like how like, you know, we're saying, you know, we're gonna have a lunchtime, right? But then some people may not be able to have access to food or during that time. So if we could maybe come up with some type of way to support the members who don't necessarily have access, or support everyone, honestly, during those lunch periods. Like I know there was a suggestion out there where another campus out there is doing like gift cards through DoorDash, like $20 a day, basically for their meal to eat, or we can do something less, or just some, I guess, thinking about creative options. I don't know if folks are thinking about that.
Thank you, President Finley, for that. I would ask if maybe Board Coordinator Park or Executive Director Lund give some information about that, or any other board member give feedback on that idea.
Yes, I greatly appreciate the suggestion. And I think that's absolutely something that this associated students would consider. If it's something that you would like to make within the motion as more of a requirement, please feel free to do so. At this point, as this item is written, it's just about the dates. And so more of those details can absolutely be either made through a motion or also just advocated to, and we can try and instill them that way.
Thank you, Board Coordinator Park. Is there any more discussion at this time? Seeing none, discussion is closed, and I would like to ask if there is a motion on the floor.
A point of clarification. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Officer Sotomayor.
Yeah, I was just uncertain of, are we motioning to approve the the orientation dates? Excuse me. Thank you.
Thank you, Officer Sotomayor. So a board member could motion to approve the fall orientation dates and times. But as we kind of talked with President Finley, someone could also wrap in the requirement to figure out some way to support board members with food. But that could also be done in another way. If a board member just motions to approve the dates and times for this, then it could be advocated. So it wouldn't have to necessarily be a part of the motion. So we would be looking for either one of those motions to be made at this time. I hope that makes sense. Is there a motion on the floor at this time? The chair recognizes Vice President Lopez. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to motion to approve these dates for the training. Excuse me, orientation.
Thank you, Vice President Lopez. That motion is in order. Vice President Lopez has moved to approve August 11th to August 14th from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. and 1 to 3 p.m. as the board's fall orientation. Is there a second on the floor? The chair recognizes Representative Floyd.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Representative Floyd. Vice President Lopez has made the motion to approve the dates and times for the board's fall orientation, and Representative Floyd was the second to that motion. We will now move into debate regarding the motion on the floor. Is there any debate at this time? And you can go ahead and raise your hand to be called upon. The chair recognizes Officer Sotomayor. You have the floor.
Yeah, I was just wondering if we might consider including what Jeremiah or President Finley, sorry again, mentioned for this item, that we also investigate ways to compensate students who will be attending this and might be missing work or something like that, or, you know, a meal, something that will help out.
Thank you, Officer Sotomayor. Is there any more discussion? Is there any more debate on the topic, on the motion? Sorry. And it could be a response to Officer Sotomayor's feedback. The chair recognizes Vice President Lopez. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that's a very important, Roman, what you just said is very important, because I know that there's definitely some students here that also have other commitments. So to make sure that we can be as inclusive as possible is going to be a vital key to our success. That's all I have.
Thank you, Vice President Lopez. Could I ask a point of clarification from Vice President Lopez? Would you like to amend your motion? Or would you like to keep the one that is already on the floor?
I'd like to amend the motion to include some form of, I would say, discussion to for future discussion to consult about addressing the needs of the board for these orientations.
Okay, so I would go ahead and, oh, I see a hand raised from Executive Director Lund. You have the floor.
Awesome, thank you, Chair. So yes, the money is already approved for your training. So if we were face-to-face, Casey and I would be working to provide meals for you all anyway. So what you're doing is you're just encouraging us to do that virtually. And so with your amendment, that's great. And if that gets approved that way, then what we'll do is we'll ensure that as part of the logistics, that we'll figure out how that happens. Like President Finley said, other campuses have been super creative with how that happens. Yeah, we could get the logistics figured out, absolutely.
Thank you, Executive Director Lund. So at this time, we're going to go ahead and do a vote on the amendment to include the advocacy that we get some food support for our board members onto the original amendment. So I will go ahead and ask if there are any objections or abstentions to making that amendment to the motion.
First, we will need to hear a second on the amendment, if I'm not mistaken.
Thank you for the clarification, Board Coordinator Park. Is there a second to that amendment? The chair recognizes President Finley. You have the floor.
I second that amendment.
Thank you, President Finley. We will now move on to a vote now that we have a motion and a second. Are there any objections or abstentions to the amendment? Seeing none, the amendment is approved. Is there any more debate on the main motion that was on the floor? You may raise your hand to continue debate. Seeing none, we will go ahead and move on to a vote for the main motion with the amendment that was added. Board Coordinator Park, can you go ahead and take a roll call vote for us?
Absolutely. President Finley. Vice President Lopez.
Aye.
I believe Vice President Lamar is still traveling. Okay. Officer Sotomayor.
Aye.
Officer Volantes.
Aye.
Representative Mort.
Aye.
Representative Alvarez.
Aye.
Representative Flores is at work. Representative Floyd.
Aye.
You have unanimous approval of the motion with the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Coordinator Park. So the ayes have it and the motion carries. Our fall orientation times and dates with the amendment are approved. And that concludes our new business for today. We will now move on to the announcements. Our first announcement is that the California State Student Association, also known as CSSA, orientation and plenary meeting will occur this weekend, July 18th through the 19th, 2020. We still currently have board vacancies, and so if you or anyone you know is interested in joining the board of directors, there are still positions open that we are looking to fill in order to have a full board. Our next standing meeting will be on August 7th, and I hope that you will all be able to join us today, especially our members of the public. I would now like to ask if there are any other announcements. You can go ahead and raise your hand to give an announcement. The chair recognizes Officer Sotomayor. You have the floor.
Hi, just some event announcements. L4HSU, Lifelong Learning at HSU, I believe sponsored by the library. Don't quote me on that, is still ongoing and providing some awesome workshops, specifically as we think about our present situation and the way we interact with each other. There is a ongoing event called Whiteness Accountability Space. The description, just to kind of sum it up, is that it's a space for white folks to process feelings around anti-Blackness, police brutality, and systemic racism in order to move forward toward anti-racist action. These sessions will push back on the white tendency to intellectualize and encourage folks to stay connected to the feeling realm. The purpose is to allow white people to critically reflect, process, and ask questions with the intention of mitigating harm caused to Black, Indigenous, and people of color, BIPOC colleagues, community, and students when white people participate in conversations and spaces that are diverse. These sessions will be facilitated by white facilitators. So like I said, it is an ongoing workshop, as multiple sessions, but I do believe you can jump in at any time without issue. I just did the other day. And in saying that, I also want to encourage people who might be mixed race or white passing to also consider attending, just to have some thoughts, just have some thoughts about whiteness and how people like us can perpetuate it as well and benefit from it. And then the second one is going to be about white supremacy in Humboldt County. I'm going to link both of these. So Casey, if you're searching for the links, don't worry about it in the chat right now. And so just want to make everyone aware that I would love to see some of y'all at those events if you're able to. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Officer Sotomayor. The chair recognizes Executive Director Lund. You have the floor.
Sweet, thank you. So I just want to remind everybody, and Gio might be covering this, so I apologize if I step on your toes, that the 2020 CS Unity sign up, if I could get everybody to complete that survey by Sunday, and I will submit those interested on Monday morning. And then if you respond yes, then you will get a part 2 where you sign yourself up with additional information that they want. So this is just part 1. I just need your to know if you're interested or not. There's room for 12 for 12 students from HSU total, and so there's still room for you guys to sign up. I'll drop that survey in the chat again too.
Thank you, Executive Director Lund, for your announcement. The chair recognizes Vice President Lopez. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll say it till I'm blue in the face. Send your financial questions my way and Janissa's way and Jeremiah's way. We are ready and waiting for any financial inquiries. Yeah, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Lopez. We're having some really wonderful announcements, so I'll go ahead and ask if we have any more announcements.
Oh, yes. So I would like to echo the announcement that our chair made in terms of the plenary meeting for CSSA tomorrow. Important stuff. I will be presenting a resolution. I might run for vice chair of a position as well. But they're very interesting meetings, so recommend going.
Thank you, Representative Guerrero. Is there any more announcements? Seeing none, I would like to ask if there is a motion on the floor to adjourn this meeting. The chair recognizes President Finley. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I motion to adjourn this meeting at 5:42.
Thank you, President Finley. That motion is in order. There is a motion on the floor to adjourn this meeting at 5:42. That was made by President Finley. Is there a second? The chair recognizes Vice President Lopez.
I'd like to second the motion to adjourn the meeting at 5:42.
Thank you, Vice President Lopez. We have a first and a second. I would now like to ask if there are any objections or abstentions to adjourning the meeting at 5:42 p.m. Seeing none, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.